Hey everyone, RogueGold here, very excited for today's video. I was given the amazing opportunity recently to go hands-on with Ubisoft's upcoming Star Wars Outlaws title. And as of today, I can finally fill you all in on what I experienced and share my overall thoughts and impressions. I have a lot that I want to go over, so I don't want to spend too much time in the intro here, but there are two quick things that I think are important to underscore. One, I am very grateful for the opportunity to play Outlaws early, and I thank Ubisoft for reaching out to me about it. I was in no way compensated for my time spent playing the game nor for making this video, and furthermore, I was given no directions or restrictions on what I'm able to say or talk about, aside from a few menus they don't want shown yet as they're still being finalized up, and some specific story cutscenes that we saw. Obviously they want to avoid spoilers getting out there. I'm able to show everything that I played, and I plan to share my full unfiltered thoughts. Things I liked, things I didn't so much, so I just wanted to make that clear from the top. And then secondly, in case this is your first time checking out my channel, firstly, welcome. But for any who don't know, I primarily cover the Tom Clancy's The Division franchise on here, and so my primary interest in Star Wars Outlaws comes from the fact that it's developed by the same studio that made those games, and it's the first thing that the Division team specifically will have released since their time working on The Division 1 and 2. So of course I plan to talk about and showcase Outlaws in its own light and on its own merits, but you'll likely also see me analyzing some of the tech side of things and making some game design comparisons to the Division games, as, like I said, that was one of my biggest curiosities heading in. That's most of what I've got before diving in. Keep in mind that timestamps will be labeled below in case you want to skip around and hear my thoughts on any specific parts of the game, but without further ado, let's hyper jump on into it. Just in case anyone is brand new to the concept of Star Wars Outlaws, this is the first time you're hearing of it, here's a basic premise of the story and game. Outlaws is a single-player narrative-driven title. After playing it, I would definitely classify it as a third-person adventure game. In the lore of Star Wars, it's set in between the events of Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, and Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, so that very nostalgic era. You play as Kay Vess, who's an up-and-coming scoundrel in the galaxy's underworld, and that term scoundrel is very key for this game. It's been described numerous times by the developers how the scoundrel fantasy is their core objective. You're sneaking, scuffling, completing jobs, forging alliances, betraying people, and essentially just doing whatever comes your way that will advance your status and reputation, to work up towards pulling off some big-time heists. And as the game's slogan goes, if you're willing to take the risk, the galaxy is full of opportunity. Okay, so with that down, let's do a quick rundown of what I played. We got to experience 4 total hours of Star Wars Outlaws, which was a very solid chunk. I was appreciative of the depth of that to truly get a sense for what the game had to offer. The first 3 hours were in what felt like pretty early game content on a Savannah moon of Tashara, including some on-world missions, as well as space combat up in orbit. And then for the final hour of the demo, we got to skip ahead both in story and game progression to a later point on the cold, snowy world of Kijimi. Now, one of the big topics that I wanted to address at the top here before fully getting into my thoughts was the game's graphics and performance. I know that's been a contentious point online over the past week or two, with IGN putting out some footage that seemed to contradict and looked worse than other past B-roll put online. So I can already foresee that I'm going to get questions about those elements specifically here. For the most part, my answer to that is unfortunately going to be inconclusive. And the reason I say that is because the way that this demo was conducted was via remote streaming, meaning that while it's me playing and it's my footage that you're watching in the background, the game wasn't running on my actual machine. It was running offsite, and then the feed was being streamed to my PC. So that setup alone came with some inherent lag and a bit of jank that's just unfortunately a standard of that medium if you've ever tried streaming AAA games before. I didn't get a chance to tweak any settings. I don't know what kind of rig they had this running on, and to my knowledge, the footage, which was captured on their end, is 1080p 60 FPS. All of that is to say there were just too many filters between myself and the true raw game for me to make any definitive conclusions. I personally want to wait until launch when it's in my hands to fully judge. Some aspects of the game's visuals and performance were clear regardless of those factors. For instance, I think facial capture looks quite a bit better than what we've seen Massive put out in the Division games and even to a degree Avatar last year. That's never been something that the Snowdrop engine excels at, it's not its focus, but I've seen the internet dog on the mocap of this game a lot, and I think much of that was premature. There's stuff like snow physics that I think looks more advanced than what we saw in the Division 1 for me. Deeper blankets of them that accurately tracked when somebody walked through them. Water physics seem to be of greater quality, more realistic and reactive ripples, so definitely some improvements across the board. But even in my footage, which again they captured and provided to me, there were undoubtedly some moments where it looked like it dipped below 60 FPS. And like I said, I'm waiting to see if that's a capture method issue, if this is just a slightly older build that we played on. They've still got a a month to go until launch from when I'm posting this video, and given how high Massive tries to hold itself for a presentation of a game at launch, I think they'll work hard to try and clean up and polish as much as they can on that front. I personally don't expect Outlaws here to surpass Avatar's visual performance from last year. That was meticulously crafted there to be as breathtaking as possible, but yeah, widely TBD for me on the whole graphical side of the game. Okay, but with all of that down, let's move on to some of the more fun aspects here, the game design and the gameplay itself. Let's start with the few different outlets of gameplay that Outlaws offers, beginning with what you'll spend the most time with, Kay and Nyx. Now, as previously established, you play as Kay Vess in Star Wars Outlaws, but along with Kay, for at least what I presume will be the entirety of the journey, is Nyx, this pretty adorable little space panda. I'm so sorry, I don't know what he is. But what I really enjoyed during my time with Outlaws was how flawlessly they've made it to where Kay and Nyx feel like they're a singular gameplay unit, right? I can manually sneak around and press a button if I want to, or I can just send Nyx to go do it for me. I could wait for a guard to turn around and then go sneak attack him, or I could just have Nyx go and distract them, make them face the other way, and do a more direct takedown. That freedom and extra dimension that Nyx added to Outlaws' gameplay was definitely a standout to me. He can help you stay stealthy, he can directly jump into a fight, he could even help you cheat in cards, and that was all truly fun. And I especially appreciated the technical depth that went into Nyx's implementation as well. Many games will offer you that gameplay freedom with companions, but sometimes if you send them to a high up platform or something too far away, they'll at times just magically teleport there to complete the task, which isn't a huge deal, totally, but it's all a part of the immersion, right? With Nyx, everything that I had him do at least was 100% simulated out. I wanted him to go press a button up on the next level that I couldn't reach. I was able to watch him go and jump up some platforms, run across, and hit it. Or when there was a gap too wide for me or him to jump across, he dove into a nearby vent, popped out on the other side, and pressed a button to make the platform move. That's the little stuff that I really love. So everything with Nyx for me was a plus. As for Kay herself, obviously that's who you play as, I thought her gameplay was fully solid. I'm definitely biased here, as I said, I play and adore the Division games, which is what this development team previously worked on. Personally, if I'm doing a direct comparison between the two, I do think the Division 1 and 2 just feel a bit tighter and more fluid, but Outlaws is a different game. They're not trying to make it play or feel like the Division, and I respect that 100%. It's a solid third-person gameplay experience. I liked how the more open-ended cover system played into the game's scoundrel fantasy. The crouching option is huge, that gets used a lot, and the gunplay with Kay's blaster felt very smooth and intuitive. There were definitely a few elements of the gameplay that, again, I'm biased, but just didn't click for me as much as the Division does with how tight and well-knit your entire movement kit is there. You're able to freely jump in Outlaws, but honestly, I can't recall a single time in which I needed to. If I needed to vault up an object, there was always a prompt and a dedicated animation there that allowed me to do so, and so more often than not, I would accidentally hit jump, and it just felt a little out of place, to be honest. I feel like Kay is a grounded archetype of character. I mean, literally grounded. She doesn't have jetpacks or anything crazy like that, and so maybe not being able to jump, just like the Division, would have made everything else shine a bit more, which sounds counterintuitive, but hopefully some of you know what I mean. And then there were just some other small things, like the transition from running to getting onto a ladder felt quite clunky in comparison to the Division. I felt that the ventilation shaft portions of the game, which there were a fair few of in my time, were a little jarring going from third person to first that quickly. I get that the camera probably literally can't go anywhere else, you're in a confined tube, but maybe there was a way to do that slightly more cinematically. These are all pretty extreme nitpicks. Overall, the gameplay with Kay is extremely solid and unquestionably fun. I had a good time. And as is always the case with gameplay of a new game, it takes some time to get used to it. We only played for 4 hours and I wasn't able to tweak or tune any of my settings, so I'm sure that upon breaking the game in a bit more, many of my thoughts there could change. Outlaws then also provides two types of transportation, those being your speeder bike and your ship. And I, for one, was super curious to see how these turned out, given that this development team had only ever had to focus on character movement and gameplay in their most recent endeavors with the Division games. My verdict is split right down the middle. I thought that the speeder bike was a bit hard to get a grasp of. Again, maybe this will improve with more playtime, or that there were some settings that we'll have access to that can make this handle better for different types of players. I felt that it was a bit too sensitive. It was too fast when I was trying to go slow, and too slow when I was trying to go fast. I just couldn't really get a handle on it, personally. But fortunately, what I would argue is the more important of the two vehicle types, your ship, called the Trailblazer. God, I love this thing. From the moment I got into space, I felt like I was at home. I mean, I think the team truly nailed the physics and movement of spaceflight here. Now keep in mind, I'm somebody who prefers a more fun approach to vehicle physics, think like older Need for Speed games compared to some of the newer ones. I prefer a faster reaction time and a more responsive control scheme, as opposed to one that's a bit more methodical and pursuing a more realistic feel. Now, obviously, spaceships like those in Star Wars do not exist in our real world, so of course there's no realistic representation for them to be chasing, but I hope at least some of you can pick up on what I mean. The devs aren't trying to make you go to flight school to learn your ship here. It felt intuitive, fast, and fun from the moment I got into the cockpit, so for me, spaceflight and combat were a huge plus. With those few different categories of gameplay down though, I now wanted to move on to more broadly talk about some of the game design choices and aspects of Outlaws. So probably a few different categories we'll jump around to here, but let's start with progression. Now this part wasn't a surprise to me, as I saw it detailed in some online coverage prior to going hands-on with this demo. But what's neat about Outlaw's approach to progression is that there are no levels nor any huge skill trees like many games of this variety might have. Rather, everything is tied to jobs. Cave thinks aloud that she wants her blaster to get an upgrade, like having a shield-penetrating alternative firing mode. Maybe someone hears you say that, and then they walk up and say, hey, I know a guy who could get the parts and install the upgrade, so you get sent out to go meet them or do a job getting what they need. Or if your ship needs repairs in order to fly again, or an upgrade to be able to hyperjump, again, do a job that will earn you that part or those upgrades. As mentioned earlier on, this approach fits directly into the scoundrel fantasy. I feel like I'm scavenging and earning my way towards a higher status and a higher tier of play, so I just found that all to be very refreshing and engaging. Another part, some of the activities that you'll encounter while playing. Obviously this is a story-driven game and there is a preset main quest line to follow along with. But that doesn't mean that there isn't some variety thrown in there. For example, I ran into this pirate raid event out in the open world. It wasn't anything too crazy, just eliminate the hostiles and secure the cargo. The more promising replayable side of the game, I think, might actually come from space content, however. Each planet seems to have an explorable orbit area. Tashara's was a debris field, whereas Kijimi had this very clouded, misty area with big ice shards. And it was in my flight to Kijimi that I had some unknown activity markers popping up. I didn't get a chance to fly over and check it out, unfortunately, but it seems like there'll be stuff to do up there as well. And one very neat component looks to be the game's wanted system. Again, I didn't get to see a ton of this myself, but apparently it will function very similar to a GTA-style heat system, where the more bad stuff you do, the more pursuance you take out, the more they're going to throw at you, and that can supposedly scale all the way up to some pretty deadly adversaries. The way you can clear your name is a bit ironic if any of you still watching are Division fans. These space zones have scattered terminals of which you can park your ship next to and hold a button to clear your wanted status. Upon seeing this, I definitely had one of those whistle and point moments, as this is nearly a direct copy of the Division 1 and 2's manhunt clear mechanic. So, in many ways, the Division's rogue system has made its way into space. You're welcome. Good luck trying to unthink of that moving forward. Speaking of being wanted, however, I would be remiss without mentioning Outlaw's reputation system. This is a big part of the meta game, if you will, and that's balancing Kay's reputation with the various criminal syndicates across the galaxy. Now, unfortunately, I cannot show you the menu that lays this out in the video, but each of these factions has their own slider, whether you're more friendly, unfriendly, or neutral with them, and depending on what status you are, that can earn you various perks and rewards if you're favorable. It can bar you from entering certain zones and areas of cities if they don't like you, or it can even lead to bounties being placed on your head, I believe, if you're hated enough. And throughout my time playing, I was given several opportunities to make decisions that would directly increase my reputation with one syndicate while lowering it with another, and so that constant balance and tug of war is a big aspect here. I thought that was fun. Alright, and I've saved what was easily one of my favorite parts and strongest impressions from this demo for last, and that was the immersion of the world. That coming in both artistic and interactable forms. If you've ever played a massive entertainment game, and by that I mostly mean the Division 1 or 2, then you'll know that a painstaking level of detail goes into not only making the world you're exploring feel alive, but also lived in. Every street you walk down has a story to tell if you look close enough. And I'm happy to report that I found those same feats achieved here. Now, obviously the world of Star Wars is very different than that of the Division. Fictional planets and aliens versus recreated cities and humans, those are vast differences. However, that didn't stop the devs from doing what they do best, and that's to tell a story just while you walk around a city, and to be fully immersed while you do so. Every object, corner shop, cantina patron, literally everywhere I looked had intentional detail added to it, and in the cases of these on-world cities, everything had an added layer of grime to convey its age and usage. Whereas environments like the Imperial base up in space was sterile and clean almost to an unsettling degree, again because that's what they do and it reflects their motives and mindset. Every object and location I saw in this demo was carefully picked and crafted to make sure that it fit and complemented the rest of the game, and so, while not surprising given Massive's track record, that was cool to see. But what I did not expect so much, however it truly impressed me, was how much detail went into small interactable world elements. Two specific cases I can point to. The first was that while I was out on a job, which entailed breaking into a syndicate's loot stash to steal some components, I came across this random datapad on a table. I decided to read it, and it talked about how the person writing it had gained info about how the quote lightest fathier was assuredly going to win the next race. Now, I thought this was odd. It wasn't related to my quest, reading it didn't add any additional objectives on my screen or quest log, it didn't trigger any NPC dialogue, so I kept it in mind as I went and completed the job. After I did, I went and looked at my map, and I found an icon for a fathier racing station within the city. I figured there's gotta be something here, right? Sure enough, I went over to it. It asked if I wanted to place a bet on an upcoming race. I scanned through the contenders, saw that it was tracking their weight in kilograms at the bottom, so I picked the lightest one, bet the maximum amount of money, and sure enough watched as that fathier raced to victory, scoring me a good chunk of cash. I thought that was pretty damn cool. I love that the game didn't handhold me to this. Rather, I read the note, thought it stood out. I found the betting station, tracked the weight myself, and was able to follow the clue in order to win. It was absolutely a non-essential element for them to add into the game, but one that I loved, and it just made things feel that much more immersive and cared for. And then the second example that I was referring to earlier, playing Sabacc. Now this has also been shown in some marketing and online coverage, so maybe you've already seen it, but Star Wars Outlaws features a fully fleshed out and detailed card game from Star Wars lore for you to play. I found myself with a few extra minutes on Tashara before we moved on to the Kojimi content in the demo, and so in wandering around and exploring the city, I came across this Sabacc table and it asked if I wanted to play. There was a whole tutorial and rules page to refer to, an entirely dedicated UI pops up to accommodate the game flow. Again, it was just really cool. It made me feel like a lot of care had gone into making this world and universe feel alive and storied. Alright my friends, well that just about wraps up the majority of my impressions and standout thoughts after getting to play Star Wars Outlaws. I sincerely hope you all enjoyed the video and liked seeing this early preview. Once again, a big thank you to Ubisoft for inviting me. I really enjoyed my time with the game. I don't think it's perfect. As you saw if you watched all the way through, I think the gameplay across different modes of transport has a few rough edges on it. There's obviously some graphical inconsistency and wonkiness going on that hopefully they can sort out before launch, but at its core I think this is a very well-defined narrative package, at least from the bits I was able to see. They've nailed the scoundrel fantasy and the richness of the Star Wars universe very well, and this is a game I look forward to playing myself upon release, which says a lot as I typically don't have a lot of time for nor often choose to invest in one-off story titles like these. But Massive makes some fine games, and I'm excited to further explore this one. As I said, hope you all enjoyed watching. Any questions you may have about what you've seen in this video or other curiosities about what I may have played or thought about what I played, any and all of it, I would love to read through it down in the comments below. What are your thoughts on Outlaws after seeing the video? What further questions do you still have? Let me know. That is just about going to do it for me on this one though, everybody. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. RogueGold. Out.